We're Old Head and
Young Shoulders.
I am literally his old head. I remember, Cam, when you were in my school, and you frankly were a bit of a pain at times, Cam. I say that in a caring way, but you didn't always get it right, did you?
Definitely not. And I think for me personally, even talking and building this whole platform, what we are doing now, is an incredible thing for me. Especially when I remember being in school and being terrified of you a little bit at the time, especially towards the later years for me personally, because I knew I wasn't making the right choices. And I knew if I continued that process, I'd probably end up in your office.
You see, I just insulted you. I said you were a bad lad. We knew you were a good lad at heart.
I was.
And to be fair, we had some cracking staff, and we were determined to get you to the end of year 11, and we did. And I'm chuffed to see the way in which you've gone off at the end of that school career, and you've really carved out a niche for yourself. I salute what you're doing. I think it's awesome.
Thank you. And for everybody who's watching or listening at home, over this whole project of Old Head, Young Shoulders, we really aim to inspire and motivate people, not just really in education, but also within life, whether they're going after their goals and their dreams. And what makes this so special is not only are you just a head teacher, old head teacher, you are also my old head teacher. So I'm really, really looking forward to working with you and moving this forward and hopefully helping and inspiring anybody who tunes in, watches us, you name it. But to begin with, I want to quickly, because I don't know too much about your backstory, but before we go into today's topic, I want to ask you, because I know you wasn't always a head teacher. So what did you do before? Was you good in school yourself?
Cam, I was like you in school. I was a pain in school. School for me was failure. I left school a long time ago now with rubbish qualifications. The only things I enjoyed at school were looking out the window and PE. So I got out of school as soon as I could. I was looking for a job that enabled me to be outside and travel, and I went to sea. I joined the Merchant Navy, and I had 7 years at sea. It gets boring being at sea the whole time. So what can you do on board? You can read. I was reading all the rubbish in the ship library. Okay. And when I was home on leave, I moved into a house full of students, and they basically put me on a reading course. I didn't realise it, but they said, read this, read that. They gave me Hardy, they gave me Lawrence, people I'd never heard of. Okay. After a year of reading these people, they said to me, you should jack it in, you should do A-levels. And I said, me, I'm thick. I was told I was thick all the way through my school career.
So quickly, so what would you say your level of ability was with reading before you started reading, say, religiously on a regular basis?
I could read, I could make sense of a book, but I wasn't a reflective reader. I didn't think very deeply about anything. Okay. I was just reading Westerns mainly, okay. Stuff with a beginning, a middle and an end. And they put me on this reading course, and then I decided to act on their advice to jack it in. I got a job as a hospital porter in Cardiff. I left the sea. I took a pay cut. I left the sea. Oh, wow. Got a job as a hospital porter and studied. Went back to college in the evenings and studied for my A-levels, and got to university as a mature student.
When you say mature, how old?
Mid-20s.
Mid-20s, okay.
Went to Cardiff, great university. And I was halfway through my degree, and I thought, I can do this. This is easy. I've suddenly learned to use my brain. Okay. Wouldn't it be great to go into teaching and work with young people who used to be like I was, who lacked self-belief in themselves, who thought they couldn't do it? And that's what took me into teaching. And teaching people, if you're looking for a really inspiring, wonderful job, go into teaching. It is the best job in the world. I say,
no promotion,
it's true.
No promotion.
It's true. See, I was lucky. I found a job that I loved. It never really felt like work. So,
do you supposed to say that? Was that the truth?
That's the truth.
Okay.
And you have to have that because teaching's stressful. It's flipping hard work.
So when you left the Navy, and you had the vision of becoming a teacher straight away? Or did that take time whilst being at college and then university? Did that come?
I think it was seeing the way in which I had changed.
Okay.
Growing in self-belief. My brain didn't switch on basically until my mid-20s. Okay. I was fairly thought, yeah, you identify with that. Yeah. Well, we come from the similar place, if you like. where we took a load of wrong turns. And that's partly what Old Head Young Shoulders is all about. Together, we've made an awful lot of mistakes.
We have.
Which we learn from. Hopefully people out there can learn from our mistakes and save themselves a lot of wrong turns along the way.
I think it's incredible, especially because a lot of people, obviously I go into a new school nearly every single day, and I see what works and what doesn't. And it's always interesting to see the relationship the students have with their head teachers. And for people to have basically an opportunity to get inside of a head teacher's head. Also, you do consulting for head teachers, is that correct?
That's
Along
right.
the lines?
So I now do school improvement partner. How many schools do you visit in a year, do you think?
Oh, I don't know. So, for example, last week I was in 9 different schools last week. So it varies. Sometimes I'm in the same schools. It depends.
Yeah.
It really varies. But I'd probably say 100 maybe.
I visit about 50 schools a year because I do school improvement partnership work
Okay.
now, and I do associate work and so on and so forth. So to get, what a privileged place we're in, because we get to go into about 150 schools every year.
Don't quote me on that. I need to double check. That's a great question.
It's a guesstimate, but in each one there will be something that is inspiring.
Of course.
Whatever standard that school is, there will be people there doing fantastic work.
Always.
So I always come away buzzing from any school that I visit.
So was it a big step for you to go, because you're essentially self-employed? Kind
Well,
of?
I did 30 years of teaching. It went really well.
Okay.
I mean,
And how old are you now?
I'm 63.
A bit old.
Age is just a number. But let's not get into the age thing.
That's for another
right.
day.
But there is something about staying fit, staying on top of your game, and so
Of
on.
course.
So we can talk about that some other time. But yeah, I got to 60. I did 12 years of headship. You were at my school. You saw the way in which we transformed that school. The school when I arrived was heading in the right direction, but had not been in a good place.
Yeah.
And over 12 years, we nailed it. We transformed it, and it was a real team effort. I had some cracking staff.
And I think the biggest thing, what I noticed, especially being in school, was still the level of respect the students had for the staff, the senior leadership team, and yourself. So on a day-to-day basis, I didn't have much contact with you at all. I think we probably only had 2 or 3 contacts, as far as, obviously you did his assemblies. I know you used to come into some of our lessons, but as far as a one-to-one, obviously you got, how many students was there?
They were 1,200.
Yeah, 1,200 students. So I can remember having a few conversations with you, but no doubt everybody always hates the boss. Everybody always hates the head teacher. Sometimes the staff does, or even when it doesn't matter. Some people hate the manager when they're part of a sports team, the captain maybe. It depends. People always, whoever's on the top, people tend to look at them, and sometimes you can always get a bit of envy, hatred, because that is the person you blame, or who we want to blame, essentially. And with that said, you being at the top, regardless of how I felt towards school, there was always a huge amount of respect from me to you, and also people around me, if that makes sense. And I don't know whether that comes from your leadership, if that was done on purpose, because obviously I was there in the field where you was actually implementing your knowledge, your processes, you becoming a head teacher, essentially, your game plan.
Yeah. I mentioned how I had great staff. We knew what we wanted. We had a really clear vision, and we had cracking teaching, and we had cracking support staff. Support staff don't get enough credit. Together,
I agree.
We thought it was really important. It's about modeling the sort of behavior that you want young people to show themselves. So if you want young people to be polite, to be positive, to be upbeat, to be optimistic, you've got to show them what that looks like.
True.
And we found it really easy to do that. And one thing that we consciously worked on was to create a happy, healthy school. And we invested a lot. I had some brilliant senior leader colleagues who believed very powerfully. They led the way on this, on student voice. I learnt from them. They had a real passion about listening to students. So we did an awful lot on setting up school parliament, the Time to Talk team, things like that. And when students start feeling listened to, that's when relationships improve. And if you've got improving relationships, then you can tell some. I had to tell you off on occasions, but you challenge. Yeah, I did. You think back, but you challenge the behaviour. You don't challenge the person. You separate out the behaviour from the person. So you were never a bad lad. We knew that. You were a bit lost. When I saw you recently, you told me, didn't you, that the old Cameron wasn't the real Cameron. And there's something like that. There are young people out there who haven't found themselves yet. They're feeling their way, and they need a bit of help to be on the right path. So to go back to that, you model the behaviour you want to see, you listen to young people, you work on relationships, and then if it's going wrong, you're challenging them over their choices, not the kind of person that they are.
Yeah. And I think, to add on to that, it's very important to be aware, especially if you're watching or whether you're listening. I don't care really what your situation is. You might not even be involved in education. But I think what you just said then can really be implemented in anything. Because not only did you talk about maybe potentially running a school, but also what we can do as individuals, even as parents. Because what you said, essentially leading by example. And you can't ask somebody to do something you're not willing to do. You can't say, be happy, put a smile on your face if you're over here looking grumpy. And this goes a lot deeper than just school improvement. This is everyday communication and relationships we have. So I know right now there's going to be a massive emphasis on education, but even in sports, being in your team, are you carrying the right attitude? Do you have the right people around you? And sometimes we need to take a step back and actually evaluate ourselves. And I'm far from perfect, Peter. I'm still got a long way to go. And obviously we got John over there as well. And one thing what he says is, as you just said as well, just to reinforce it, is we had to be somebody we're not to kind of find out who we are. And when I was younger, when I was 16, 17, 18, I was there inspiring to be something I wasn't. And with that came, I was essentially kind of acting. We all was, all to fit into this group, because we all wanted to be a part of something together. We all wanted to be relatable, and we all had each other's back. And because of that, we might have done things we regretted. We might have done things what wasn't essentially us. Because I remember we would go out. I'd come back at 5 o'clock in the morning at 17 years old and think to myself, what have we just done? But then the next night I'd go out and we'd do it again. And then again and again. But eventually you grow out of it.
You've made me talk about myself, which, as you know,
I'm very interested in.
Yeah, I know you are.
That's the reason I wanted to do this. So.
But tell me about you, because you left Seven Vale. We got you to the end of year 11. You got some reasonable GCSEs.
Yeah, 4
GCSEs.
But I still got my English and maths. That's one thing I've really pushed for when I was there.
And you had cracking English and maths teachers. I know you did, didn't you?
Oh, incredible. Luckily, I was very, very, very lucky. I had 2 amazing English and maths teachers, Mrs. Pierce and Mr. Malvin, because even when my headspace wasn't there, even when I said I didn't care, they still pushed me in class. They would still ask me to read out or do this. So I was very, very lucky I had 2 great teachers, because some teachers just, I don't care, get him out. I don't want him involved. He's interrupting. But they pushed me, and because of that, I was very, very lucky to get my C's. I also got a C in drama. I think I would have got an A, but I didn't do the coursework because of the performance side of it. But I got a C in drama, but the rest were fails, and I learned from that. And
when did you learn from that? What happened to you when you left Seven Vale?
So when I left Seven Vale, that's a good question. So my father always wanted me to work for him, but I wasn't really too keen. I wasn't really into that. So I just got an apprenticeship, what a lot of people actually don't know, working in a car garage. So I was actually at Gloucester College doing an apprenticeship, but that lasted about 4 months. At this time, my dad moved to Bristol, but I was still going out on the night times in Gloucester doing what we was doing. So I was kind of living two lives. And then after a while, I realised I didn't really want to be a car mechanic. Being freezing cold outside and going out and cleaning the car after a service wasn't really me, and I didn't want to do that. But this time I was very lucky because I was playing sport. So I started playing American football, and that American football program was in Bristol, which was the American Football Academy, the only elite academy in the country, and maybe the Europe. That might have changed now. But the coach invited me and said, we want you to be a part of the academy, come to our college. So that was basically it. So the next day after that, I quit the car mechanic job. I got moved to Bristol then with my dad properly, I would say. Even though I had my bedroom there and I would still be there, but I fully committed to it. I fully tried committing to the change. And I just got a part-time job then working in a restaurant until September came and I joined the academy. And then it was there where I really started to transition from a boy to a man. And that was through training, that was through sport, also through my business studies. So go ahead.
Yeah, I got a question. When I went to see you in your office the first time that I sort of met you as an adult,
Yeah.
you've got bookcases lining the walls. When did you start reading?
Around the same time.
Right.
Around the same time.
Yeah.
Even before becoming a speaker, I didn't have many words in my vocabulary at all. I had about 15, 20 words in my vocabulary, maybe even less. It wasn't pleasant. However, I just started reading maybe one page at a time. And then I really got into it. And because I started taking more of a role in my sports teams, in my job and stuff like that, I had to start articulating a little bit better. So that meant I was reading out loud. I was keep going through it, taking notes, really just trying to educate myself. Even if I didn't believe everything I was reading, it just still supported me in the person I wanted to become. And when I was in university, taking a little bit of a jump there, but after the business course in college and after playing for Great Britain, all these things, it was in my very first year at university where I discovered I was heavily dyslexic. And when I found out I was heavily dyslexic, it was in the first the person who told me after my test, he said I was at a level of a year 9 student, which was a bit crazy because I'm like, how did I even get to university? Yeah. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
But then he also said I had ADD as well, attention deficit disorder, which I thought was very interesting because I was there in university thinking I'm becoming more stupid. But in fact, I just had dyslexia and I just had to be able to work with that. And when I found out I had dyslexia, I started noticing in my reading when there was a difficult word, I would skip over it. I'd miss sections and I didn't really notice that before.
There'll be loads of dyslexic people out there. And what one develops, one develops really good coping strategies. It sounds to me as if you nailed the coping strategies that allowed you to succeed despite your dyslexia, ADD. Yep.
Yeah, so... And that's really where I am. Graduated from university, being the first in my family to do it. And for me, that was an achievement.
That's so important, getting that first generation off
to
university.
Why though? So, for example, like I was at a grammar school recently. I'm not going to say the name. But I asked, put your hands up if you want to go to university. 98% of them put their hands up. I went to a inner city school in the southwest. Put your hands up if you want to go to university. I think I've seen about 3 hands. Why is that? Going off subject a little bit.
It's about a culture. It's about expectation. I'm really disappointed to hear that about the second school that you mentioned. I don't think...
Not every school is like that, but I remember it was the day after the grammar school, and I thought I'd ask, and that's what I seen.
I think you need in any school to be sowing high aspirations in the minds of your incoming year 7s. We're not good in this country, I don't think. This is me getting on my high horse for a minute. I've got a lot of respect for primary colleagues, and they work with primary school children for those 6 years. They come up to secondary school, and we spend too long getting to know them. We ought to be much better at knowing about them as learners and about them as individuals. And a lot of schools are doing this well. The ones who are doing it well persuade year 7 from the moment they set foot across the threshold, you're going to achieve at this place. Having said that, university isn't for everybody. There are some cracking apprenticeships out there. So I think what matters is
a good point, actually.
that whatever road you go down, it's got to lead upwards, but it doesn't necessarily have a university at the end of it. But everybody can achieve if they get the right support.
Okay, so let's get into the main topic of this podcast, because I feel like we could just go and go and go. And obviously, this is going to be the first of many. And the subject for this podcast is going to be really the notion of starting now. It doesn't really matter what you're starting, whether you're starting going to the gym, whether you're starting some research into maybe a business you want to create, maybe it's starting the application stage for something. I don't know, absolutely anything. So I think this is really important, especially as this is the first podcast to discuss why starting now is essential. Why we don't want to overthink the process. And to begin with, I want to start this off with what we're doing. So how many meetings we had? About 2 or 3?
3.
3. So it was probably on our second meeting. I said to you, I think I got an idea. Let me have a little think of it and I'll send you an email later. And I sent you a big descriptive email saying, listen, this is what I want to do. I think we should run a podcast with videos. I got the cameraman, gadget line. We've got everything set up. You said a name in our meeting, which was Old Head, Young Shoulders, which wasn't even for the podcast. I said that should be our podcast name.
That was a throwaway line. So it's funny how things stick.
So then you said to me, okay, let's have a meeting in a couple weeks. And we had the meeting. And we said, okay, what do we need to do? We need to do this, this, and this. And I said to you, don't worry about anything yet. I will sort it. And in that process, in literally, 2 weeks, I think it was, a week and a half, we booked in the date for the podcast, which is obviously today. And we didn't have nothing set up. Nothing was ready to go. We didn't have a logo. We didn't have no branding. Nothing was set up.
Yeah. And you made it happen. But go back a step.
Okay.
Because I think we both had a sort of vision of what this looked like. We knew where we wanted to get to.
I think you did, but I don't think you understood the power of this.
But with anything, you're right. I didn't get how well this could work. But we had that with anybody starting anything. Know what you're going to achieve. Have a vision for where you want to get to.
Of course.
And then what you were awesome at doing was breaking it down and getting a plan.
Of course.
Getting a few key action points, and you didn't mess around then. You nailed them. I take my hat off to you.
And I just think, going into this whole notion of starting now, we're not looking for perfection. We're looking for progress. And I say that a lot. Okay, right now, we might look back on this episode in a year's time after we filmed many and say, this was dreadful. We rambled, we did this, we did that. But until we start doing it...
That's because you and me aren't bothered about failing particularly.
Okay.
If you, like you say, if we waited to get things perfect, time would just drift by. You get better at putting yourself out there, get out your comfort zone, because that's where the good stuff happens. It doesn't matter if the wheels fall off. You learn your way forwards. So don't be afraid of failing. Just pick yourself up, learn from it. That quote from Nelson Mandela about I never lose. I either win or I learn.
Okay, wow. Yeah.
So get out there, go for it, have a plan. No plan works perfectly. Make a few mistakes along the way, learn from them, get better.
Yeah. And just talking about progress again with the gadget line behind the cameras now, as I said on Monday, we basically came to the realization that we didn't have everything we need for the studio. So we was quite angry at the time, wasn't we, Dave? We was quite angry, I guess. And we said, what do? Do we pull the plug Or do we continue and it just not be perfect, but at least we're still doing it and we're putting content out? And Dave said, so what do you want to do? What's the decision? He said he still wants a film. What's the plan? I said, okay, 2 years ago, I say, it's not perfect. We need this, we need that. But basically, I was procrastinating on actually getting the job done. And I said to Dave, you know me now. What do you think? He said, let's just do it. Let's just film. And then you text me saying, what's the time, the place? Here it is. Let's go. Here's the subjects we're talking about. Come prepared. And here we are.
And the moral of the story is that done is better than perfect. We've done it. You've done it.
Better than perfect.
Yeah.
So then let's flip the switch, right? We talked a little bit about the podcast. Starting now, another example is when you was at sea, when you was in the Navy, getting paid, maybe having a good money, having a fantastic experience. How'd you go from that to teaching? Obviously, we talked about a book club, we talked about all these things, but at some point, you had to start now again. So at some point, you said, I'm leaving. This is my new journey. I'm starting. When a lot of pressure, maybe parents, maybe people around you already had high paying jobs. You might have went back to university as a mature student. So you was the oldest one there. So then there's all that kind of pressure and that social kind of what's the social norm. But you had to start again and you had to start now. How did that happen?
It happened because I suddenly woke up to what it was that I really wanted. And you said when you were at school, that wasn't the real you. I think it's when you find out what it is that you really want and then that you go for it. There are an awful lot of people out there who are working away at stuff that doesn't really suit them. That's not what they really... So find out what it is that you really, really want to do. And it's not about chasing money. It's not about getting more stuff. These things matter up to a point, but to be really satisfied with what you're doing, you're going to find something that you love. You're being true to yourself. You're being honest. I was talking to Dave earlier about how he got into this filming business.
Gadget line, follow.
He's found something that he absolutely loves. So the people who are lucky out there are the ones who are working away at something that gives them deep joy.
But are they lucky if they created it? So Dave could look at where his business is right now and be like, he's worked his absolute hardest to get to where he's got to. And the situation he is at right now, I'm not saying it is the case, but he still might be better off just to go and get a job down in Bristol City and get 40 grand a year instead of doing what he likes. But is it what, like... I struggle when people say it's luck, if that makes sense. Not saying you said that, but what do you think to that?
People make their own luck.
Okay.
And that Gary Player, golfer, the more I practice, the luckier I get. So we make our own luck to an extent. But again, you take your own time. The other thing is, it's never too late to put things right.
It's never too late.
I've got a coaching company that I'm setting up, Second Chance Coaching. We all get you got it's just an idea at the moment. But okay, so school didn't go well for you. You got a second chance to put things right. I got a second chance. We all get a second chance, and you got to be just alert and seize that opportunity when it could make things happen.
Okay, and John, if you don't mind, could you just look up a book quickly on the internet? And a quick book recommendation. It's called Relentless, I believe, and it's from Michael Jordan's old coach, his one-to-one coach. He also trained Kobe Bryant. He trained some of the top athletes in the world, essentially. And he said what's made them different was the fact that they didn't overthink the process. So, for example, when they go up to take the game-winning three-point shot, which is going to win the series or whatever it might be, he doesn't think about that shot. He grabs the ball and he goes up, takes the shot like he's done hundreds and millions of times. Where people might think the pressure, what's coming, if I miss this shot, we're going to lose the game, I'm going to be on the tabloids, it's going to ruin my life. My kids are going to look down to me. I don't know. But what separates the good from great is they don't overthink it. And I think that is so important when you're starting something, because it's so easy to say, okay, what happens if we start this podcast, right, and nobody watches or nobody listens? Kind of back to failure, like what you said. I personally don't care. But
You're very popular out there. There's going to be people watching.
I am popular.
But the other thing about this, you mentioned Michael Jordan. With these top sportsmen, there's something here about peak performance. And how do you make sure that under the most pressured situations, you perform to your very, very best? And I'm told that what these people do is they don't obsess about success. They don't obsess about the outcome. They just focus on the process. So don't obsess. We're not obsessing about what this might look like in a year's time, about how perfect we can get it. It's about enjoying the actual process, and just focus on enjoying the process of heading in the right direction, taking one step at a time. And if you do that, then you make progress. You achieve success. You don't obsess about it.
So what would your final tips be for starting now? Do you have any underlying thing you would say to somebody?
Decide what it is you want to achieve. Make a plan of how you're going to do it. I think there's a lot to be said about sharing your plan, because then you're accountable. You tell a few people
accountability is everything.
Because then you've got to make it happen. Because,
that should be a separate podcast. I think
we'll do something else about that. Also, just chunk your plan down. You can't do it all in one giant. It's lots of little baby steps. Don't worry if it goes wrong. Get back on board again. You might miss a training session. You might miss a deadline. That's okay. You just get back on board and you keep moving forwards.
Perfect. John, did you get that book?
Yes. Relentless, from good to great to unstoppable.
Who was the author? Tim S. Grover. So check that out. If you haven't read that book, I definitely recommend it. But I'm happy with everything we said. You happy with everything? Should we wrap it up?
That's a wrap. We need a message to give people.
And what do you think that should be?
I like those KIPP schools out in America. They tell people two things: work hard, be nice.
But I'm not nice.
Well, you do the work hard then. Okay. You are nice, Cam. Stop dissing yourself.
Occasionally, not when I'm driving. Maybe with a bit of road rage. I don't know.
I reckon we should just say, remember, people, out there, as much as you can, work hard.
And be nice. And this is
Old Head
and Young Shoulders. Thank you for tuning in, guys. Make sure you follow us on our social media pages, our YouTube, our Twitter, and we will see you on episode 2.